All right. So there's this fella in town, and he's dating somebody I've known for a lot of years. And we got a next door neighbor that, well, it's Nebraska, full of racists. So I'm over there, and I've only known him a couple of days. I haven't asked about his ancestry. I figure it's none of my business. But I'm venting and fuming about how here I am stuck in Chapel, Nebraska, where they blame everything on blacks and Mexicans, and there ain't no blacks or Mexicans here. He says, I'm not Mexican. I'm Indian. I looked at him, fucking a little bit weirded out. I've met people from India. I said to him, dude, you don't look a thing like someone from India. You don't sound a thing like someone from India. He looks me straight in the eyes, serious as can be. Try not to crack a smile when he says to me, no, 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 no. No, don't. That peckerwood next door. You'd have thought somebody shit in his Cheerios. Now, the best part about that is it's offensive to everybody. That makes it about the best story I got to tell. At least right at this here moment. I working on a song for my friend Anna, who passed away last year. She pardon my French there. She used to call me when she'd take a bath. I was her rubber ducky. You know what we talked about? We reminisced about Boulder. We talked about old friends. She bitched about her boyfriend. I bitched about my boyfriend. I ain't even got one. I got friends of every color. I got friends of every nationality. I got friends with, well, they use descriptives I never even heard. I tell you what, Ashley, for your good quality entertainment, now although I am, God, that's fucking floppy hair. Now, I actually don't need to have my eyes open to do this, but whatever. You think I should do 2 or 3? Now, I'm not doing it pretty, just doing it fast. Give you a little something to look at, a little something to make fun of. So I got court in 2 days, right? Now, Jen Beebe, big fucking surprise, was not able to keep her word today. So she had her boss call me and tell me he wants to reschedule it with her for Thursday at 1 o'clock. What happens on Thursday? I got court. I really needed her help before I had to break the law to begin with. Now, one thing that's important to remember about that fucking train is that at night it goes by about every 20 fucking minutes. You know, Ashley, you're not the only person who said that. But then again, who's gonna make her do her job? Who's gonna make her keep her word? The cops aren't gonna do it. See, all these motherfuckers want to make excuses for the fucked up shit that they do, following immoral laws and immoral protocols. And also the fact that when they fuck up, there are no goddamn consequences. I wish I'd have recorded the phone call with her boss, but I was a block away from my computer when that call came in. I definitely had my hefty share of attitude in my voice, but I talked to him nicely. Kind of like when somebody steals your shit and then they bring it back. Do you say thank you as, oh, thank you, that is so sweet of you? Or do you say, thank you? In that case, I'm going to say, thank you. Now get the fuck off my property. Except I don't own property except for this here little trailer. And it's not the kind of property that I need. Well, that's not true. This is absolutely the property that I need. It just doesn't have any property of my own to put it on. Before Natalie died, well, I had a 5-month plan to get myself a chunk of property. Now, you might not think that somebody can earn a chunk of property in 5 months. Well, that's where doing your research works out. I found almost 12 acres in San Juan County, Colorado for under $10,000. Ain't hardly a tree on it. And it's on the side of a mountain. But it's all rock. And we're not talking about river stones that are difficult to build with and get a lot of wind through them because they're rounded. We're talking about granite shale. Now, there was 2 properties I was looking at. Now, that one right there, me and Natalie had been talking about that property since before she left for Virginia. The other property is the house where this trailer is parked. And I got to tell you, the lady who wanted to sell me this house, good evening, CCR. The lady who was going to sell me this house, she wanted it for $7,000. Hell of a good deal, right? Yeah, except after Natalie died and all my money was getting eaten up and I couldn't come back to Nebraska because I had false charges against me because I was assaulted by Officer Waylon Lolatai. Although I can't look at that as a bad thing with this house. You know why? Because the guy who bought it doesn't do meth, doesn't do cocaine, doesn't do heroin, and he bought the place because he's thinking about his children. And even better than that, he got it for $1,500. Anyway, I just got on to tell you that story. Although I got one more story about a Native American. There's this guy from, I don't know if he's from North Carolina or South Carolina. He liked to go by Boomhauer, but his real name is Byington. Now, he used to live here with Megan Christie. That's the lady that used to own the place. Brock was a real heavy meth head. And he's actually a part of many of my stories, including the stories with Andrew Witcher and many, many others. Now, the thing about Boomhauer, which you like to be called, and we all know where that came from, is that you weren't too bright. So I was over at my friend Jeff Baldridge's, and I just get annoyed by stupidity sometimes. And I'm complaining about how dumb as a fucking stump Brock Byington is. And Jeff says to me, "Is he good to you?" I stopped and I went, "Well, what the hell does it matter if he's good to me? What's that have to do with anything?" He said, "Is he good to you?" I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "Well, know who's good to you and be good to them." I wonder if I can do anything offensive. Probably not. I gotta tell you, that hurts. It stopped twice because it caught my mustache. Well, if I do it slow, it doesn't pull out my mustache, but it doesn't sound very good. This is a Mississippi harmonica. They're cheap. I believe it's supposed to be in the key of C, but I got no clue. It said on the box, but that was years ago that I got this. There's one thing about autistic folks is repetition and routine. Keep it the same and keep it simple. So every year for my birthday, while I was in Boulder, Colorado, I bought a model of the Wright Flyer. And every year for Christmas, I bought myself a Mississippi harmonica. I got it backwards, don't I? Yep, the plane. The Wright Flyer. That was all right. I'll give you a little quick history on planes. The end of the Civil War was what year? 1884. Of course, that depends on if you believe the end of the Civil War happened when General Lee signed that document at Appomattox Courthouse, or if you believe that the end of the war was when the last Confederate troops laid down their arms. Now, between 1884 and 1903, when the Wright brothers flew the Wright Flyer at Kill Devil Hills, y'all know where that's at? I'll give you a hint. I was there in 2016 and it weren't Virginia. Now, the funny thing about that, in between the Civil War and the First World War, I mean, less than 30 years, 84 to 94. Holy shit, that's less than 20. You see how fast technology really picked up pace at that point. The hell, is there a fucking pothead here? Fuck my back. Now, in 1889, the manly-balzer engine was created. The manly-balzer engine was a 50 horsepower engine, radial design. It was funded by the United States government to be the first airplane engine before they even know how to make a friggin' airplane. So we got the Wright brothers, right? And of course, they don't want to take anybody else's idea. They want all the money for themselves. So they decided to build their own engine. Now, mind you, the manly-balzer engine is well under 100 pounds. Well under 100 pounds. Fully stocked, fully loaded, with all of the trim and gear. But no, Wright brothers wasn't having none of that. So what did the Wright brothers do? Well, I want you to understand that the manly-balzer engine also had 50 horsepower. 50! Now that sounds like almost nothing for an airplane, right? Well, the Wright Flyer, the engine in it had an aluminum block. It weighed 212 pounds. And it was well under 15 horsepower. Not 50, 15. How far below 15? It was a 12 horsepower engine that weighed over 200 pounds. And I'm sorry, I said it was 212 pounds. It was only 209. A lot of times I get my numbers wrong and mixed up, and I do apologize for that. Now, in between 1903, when that thing flew at Kill Devil Hills, I want you to consider the fact that the Wright Flyer took off into a 20-mile-per-hour headwind. If it hadn't for that, the thing never would have taken off. That engine did not have the power to weight ratio to take off. Did the Wright brothers make the first flyable airplane? No, they did not. No, they did not. That thing could not have possibly taken off under its own power under any circumstances except for the exact circumstances of that day. Just a little bit of a gust to the left or a little bit of a gust to the right, they would have crashed it. Would it have killed him? Fuck no. Not unless the engine landed on him, and then, yeah, there wouldn't be much. Now, then we advanced rapidly, right? So we start getting into World War I. Now, in World War I, we're flying a lot of stuff like the Dust and the Blériot 11 and the B-5A. I mean, these things can barely take off, but they can take off under their own power, unlike the Wright Flyer. Now, at the time, they were just observation airplanes, and they'd fly past each other. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And they didn't have any guns, so when a German pilot would pass a British pilot or a French pilot, they'd wave at each other. Well, then some hotshot got the idea of getting guns and shooting at each other with rifles. You ain't gonna hit somebody with a rifle unless you're lucky as fuck. Are you kidding me? These are not enclosed cockpits, by the way. You have everything being blasted in your face. You've got open ports on radial engine, if it had a radial engine. And all that oil and stuff, it's castor oil, by the way. It's not motor oil like we got today. It's castor oil. And the engine burns through the castor oil. the same way it burns through gasoline. So basically, you got two fuel tanks, and one of them is just lubricant. And when it's ejected, it goes right in the pilot's face, and it does burn them. Meanwhile, that wind is going, well, in the first part of the war, about 70 miles an hour, if they were lucky. I mean, the D5A, 35 miles per hour, with a stall speed of 30 miles per hour for the very first model. So then we enter the Moraine-Saulnier. Models N and Model H in specific. So there was a Belgian. I like to give Germans the credit for everything in Germany in World War I and World War II. Oh, the Germans were so smart. No, they did exactly what the Romans did. They took people over and stole their shit, and then made their smart people build stuff for them. Like the Siege of Syracuse. Did you know that the Siege of Syracuse wasn't actually because they wanted to take over all of Sicily? Don't get me wrong, they did want to take over all of Sicily, but they wanted Archimedes. Archimedes was Greek. Now, the manly-balzer engine had a great power-to-weight ratio, but it wasn't used on any of the airplanes in World War I. America was not in the war until kind of, sort of 1916, but there was no way we were going to get any troops to do anything in 1916. But during the battles, well, pretty soon, this guy by the name of Anthony Fokker, who's a Belgian, had this great idea. He was going to take a Moraine-Saulnier, and he was going to take the tail off and put his own design and tail and call it the Fokker Eindecker. See, I made the plane. No, you stole plane and changed one part. By the way, this man is still famous to this day. His most famous airplane is probably the most sold airplane model in history. It's the Fokker DR1. DR1 stands for what? Zweidecker. 3 decks, or 3 sets of wings. But technically it had 4, because in between the landing gear was another aerofoil. Now, there are a lot of German pilots who are almost as famous as the Red Baron, not even close. But Max Immelman should have been. So, the second most famous pilot who ever flew a Fokker DR1, he got into a air-to-air battle against, well, a whole bunch of British aces, including the top scoring British ace of the war. He was in a dogfight, 1 against 6. And he was able to do some things that were absolutely amazing. Now, during an engagement in one, both sides had the opportunity to get away. One side built their planes specifically for dive speed so that they could outrun their opponent. The other side built their wings specifically for greater lift. You're going to not get as much speed in a dive, but you can easily climb above your opponent and get the hell out of there. The airplane that the Red Baron died in was a Fokker DR1. And the Fokker DR1 that, well, Yosta 11 is the group that the Red Baron was in charge of in World War I. Yasta 11 had Jewish pilots. And believe it or not, the swastika is a Jewish symbol. And while Adolf Hitler was in hospital, recovering from wounds sustained in battle, at least we're told it was in battle, outside of his window he saw a blue and silver airplane fly by with a swastika on the side. He had no idea the pilot was a Jew. I don't think when he put a bullet in his head at the very end that he knew that the pilot of that airplane was a Jew. Although he might have, and do you know why that is? Adolf Hitler's second in command was Hermann Goering. What's Hermann Goering famous for? When the Red Baron got shot down, Hermann Goering was part of Jasta 11 in World War I. And he took over Jasta 11. So unless that pilot died, and I don't know if he did or not, I don't know the full story of that pilot. I don't even know his name. Now that other pilot, he was able to bring down 2 airplanes, 1 observation aircraft and 1 protector aircraft. Now, mind you, there's a lot of advancements that have happened in this period of time. One of those advancements was Louis Blériot was flying a prototype airplane. Now, I should probably tell you that by this point in time, airplanes aren't the only thing as far as modern stuff that we think of that was actually invented. Blériot was the first person to cross the English Channel in an airplane. Harry Houdini was the first person to fly an airplane in Australia. And Louis Blériot, he was also the first person to successfully jump out of an airplane with a parachute. Better than that, he did it on purpose. Now, when he jumped out with that parachute, he noticed something about his airplane. He expected that as soon as he jumped out of his airplane, that it was going to plow into the ground. But it didn't. It kind of did aerial acrobatics for a couple of minutes. And he got to see it from in the air. And that's actually where aerobatics came from. Was from his very first successful, well, it was his very first test overall, because if he'd have had unsuccessful tests before that, he'd have been dead. Now, during World War I, neither side allowed their pilots to have parachutes because they thought that their pilots would jump out of perfectly good airplanes or chicken out of a fight. So if your airplane lit on fire, which was very likely with incendiary bullets, well, you either burned all the way to the ground or you took the service pistol that they handed you and you blew your brains out before the fire got to you. The airplane that the Red Baron shot down the most other airplanes in, though, is the Albatross D5A. The thing about this airplane is that it was the very first monococque design. Monococque means that it's basically 2 halves that are made separately and then stuck together. And it is still one of the most popular techniques to use to build airplanes today because you build a frame and you slap those 2 sides on it, and it is extremely structurally stable. And it also helps to hold everything so that you don't have to have 30 to 40 workers spending hundreds of hours adjusting wires and all sorts of stuff that's inside of the timber framing to try to keep it from tilting and adjusting, because if it's off by just an eighth of an inch from one side to the other, it could possibly make that airplane unflyable. Now, you also want to understand that the DR1 ran on an over 2 engine, which is basically a German knockoff of the Gnome monococque engine. And the Gnome monococque engine, monococque means single valve. They had a 7-cylinder version and a 9-cylinder version, and they were radial engines. That means they spun around in a circle. But once you start taking something heavy like that and spinning it around in a circle, you're not just spinning the propeller. The engine actually turned at a quarter of the speed of the propeller. Why did they do that? To try to cool it off. So if you tried to turn one direction, it would be very sluggish and difficult. And if you turn too hard the other direction, you'd go into a spin, you'd go into a dive, and you'd fucking die. Also, because of the incredible G-forces and the quickness of the spin that it would take you into, you'd be passed out before you hit the ground. You wouldn't know it hit you. But that engine was a lot heavier than the manly-balzer engine. A lot heavier. And it was the same horsepower, 50 horsepower, later on upgraded to 100 horsepower. Or later upgraded to 70 horsepower, then 100 horsepower. So it would have actually started with the Oberursel and not the Oberursel 2. But by the time the D58 is the D58 Albatross, I believe so. I could be wrong about that. Now, if they were to take a Fokker Eindecker and fit it with a monococque fuselage and attach a manly-balzer engine to it, well, you'd have had a pretty premier beast back in the day. Of course, who really wants to walk around saying that they fly around in manly-balzer Fokker monococque?